Our next speaker, another traveler, came all the way to us from the Netherlands via Kauai, Dr. Robbert Blonk. Dr. Blonk comes from Netherlands, where he is the Director of Research and Development at Hendrix Genetics. Robert's responsible for Hendrix Genetics' aquaculture breeding programs, which include Atlantic salmon, rainbow trout, and shrimp at Kona Bay on Kauai. That's why he was on Kauai working at Kona Bay. They also have a shrimp breeding company in Ecuador. Robbert received his PhD in quantitative genetics in aquaculture from, I struggle with this word, Wageningen University. Robbert, thank you. Can you just give them a hand sign for the
forget
thing,
about this one.
It's not working.
No, it's fine, that's fine. Yep.
Go like that. She'll tell
Okay,
you.
that's good. Jim, thanks for the introduction. Nice try, Wageningen. But I know the hard G that we are pronouncing, and you guys cannot do that. So it must be genetics, I guess. I don't know. And another one is, this morning Jim asked me to insert another slide into the presentation. So in case I run out of time, it's his fault, not mine. So I'm working for Hendrix Genetics. Hendrix Genetics is a multi-species breeding company. There will be one slide really about the company, and then I will stop doing the marketing. It's a multi-species breeding company in animals, so not in plants. And I found the previous presentation from Dr. Purcell very interesting, and I'm also glad that he did a presentation, because it means that I don't need to explain too much about the technical side, the genetics. There's a lot of similarities in what we're doing, so that's good. Please keep in mind that things that he explained we're also doing in animals. Anyway, so we are one of the biggest players in animal breeding, and that's for the biggest part because of our business in the layer industry, so egg-laying chickens, but also in turkeys. Really, the chance, if you buy an egg in the supermarket or turkey, then 1 out of 2 chances that they're coming from us originally. So that says something about the scale, and that's global. The green areas in the world are indicated over here is where we have our own bases, and now I have to admit that Hawaii is not on the map, but please, even the Netherlands is on, but it's so small you can't see it anyway, so it's about the same. We're also working in swine, slow-growing broiler chickens for meat. I will talk a little bit about that later on. And then, to my opinion, the nicest business unit that we have, and that's the aquaculture. Indeed, we're running breeding programs on Atlantic salmon, that's both in Scotland and in Chile. We're doing trout, rainbow trout, it's based in the US, Washington, and Idaho. Trout Lodge is the company. And we're having shrimp programs both in Hawaii, Kauai Island, and also in Ecuador. Someone else is doing the presentation. Okay. Next to that, we're also doing a breeding program on Pacific salmon, coho salmon. We do that for a third party. We do breeding programs for our own production, but also for third parties. In total, we have more than 3,000 employees, roughly, and it's a very nice developing company. Our goal, our mission is really to support the global food challenge. And there's a lot of things going on. We're talking about climate change. There's sustainability issues. That's about animal welfare. But it's also about making a sustainable, high-quality product so that the farmer can actually make money out of this. So this is really where we contribute by supplying the world with good starting material for these different species. Now, I was asked to give a presentation about application of genetics and animal breeding in tropical areas. but also to highlight a little bit about the Netherlands. Many people see that the Netherlands is a country that is quite well known for intensification and highly efficient agriculture. Some of you may have read the issue from the National Geographic in 2017. And if not, you can check it out on the internet. The link is there. It's a really nice article. And it shows that indeed, we are playing quite a big role, even because of the fact that we're a super small country, which is quite strange, but we're quite a big player in this area. And I hope that what I'm saying here, that there is, possibilities to also apply in Hawaii, but also in a wider, more tropical environment context. Next slide, please. So, but why is the Netherlands so big, you could say, even though small, but big in agriculture? For that, I need to take you back to the 16th century, which we call the Golden Age. This was really the time that the Netherlands really developed in trade. It was a very prosperous time for the Netherlands. And that's basically because of the trade. We are a small country, and it is quite strategically positioned in Europe. There's a lot of big rivers going into Europe, but we have very nice and sheltered access to the sea. So that means that the Dutch were able to develop as a seafaring, sea-going people, and we did a lot of trade. Well, there's also negative aspects to that, of course. It's probably also known, but I will focus now here on what it brought us in the larger context. So we were good in trade. And the other part that is very important to highlight is that about a third of the country, well, like I said, it's small, but a third is even smaller, but still relatively big, you could say, is actually positioned below sea level. And another part is, and in the total this amounts to roughly half, two-thirds of the country, is from origin very swampy area. It's a lot of flooding, and it's a very difficult country to basically, use soil, do any agriculture. So in the little map that you see over here, the green part is the part that is actually normally underwater or flooding over a lot, and the brownish color is really swampy area. So that means that there's not a lot left anymore. And this, because of the trade that we were developing, it's part of the reason is that we did that because of the position in the sea, but also our own capability to produce, to do agriculture and to produce our own crops was quite compromised simply because we did not have a lot of land available. Plus the fact that ultimately a lot of people started to work in the bigger cities, in the ports, because that's where everything happened. Our farmers did not have a lot of people around, so they had to be efficient in some way. And this is one of the reasons why we started to develop into a more efficient agriculture. I also would like to highlight the theory of comparative advantage. Some of you may know about it, but basically this says that if you're good in something, and it's better to specialize rather than do diversification. Do everything a little bit, typically is economically seen less effective than a specialization. So what the Dutch basically did is just said, well, we're good in trade. We developed as a seafaring country, people, and we're good in trading, so let's focus on that part. And because of the low amount of available land for agriculture, we'll not make that our core business. Well, eventually, I think that it did happen, but not our core business. So we also said we're not going to compete with production of agricultural products. We will focus on the trade. However, you need to be self-sustainable, like we also already concluded in previous talks. It's good to have your own production, of course. So we did have agriculture, absolutely, but in a more efficient way. So we were kind of efficient. We did develop it, but the really big boom into agriculture for the Netherlands started really in the 20th century. Years 20 and 30, with the big global crisis, of course, raw materials were very expensive. So the farmers that still wanted to make money had to be quite efficient because their input was very expensive. After the Second World War, the prices for food were very low, and that had the same effect on our farmers because they had to make sure that they were very efficient and produce a lot of crop simply to be able to make a living. So the push to become more intensive and more efficient was really there, and it also had then, of course, helped the Marshall Plan that many of you know of course, created the possibility to really push and to grow the agricultural industry. Also, the local government, the Dutch government itself, saw the opportunity, and the EU, of course, stimulated that production. And that combined with the trade capacities that we already had made the situation very positive in this aspect. So that means that these days the Netherlands takes the #2 position in export of agricultural products. That's quite extreme because it's a super, super small country. And we specialize in horticulture, crop breeding, but also greenhouse technology, for example, animal nutrition. Some of the major animal nutrition companies are also based, started in the Netherlands. Think about the Nutreco or the Hoos, for example. And not the only ones, but, and then of course, and that's the part that I will talk about, is genetic improvement. So think about plant breeding. I didn't know, honestly, before I started preparing for this talk, but we are huge in onions, and we produce roughly 60% of all the potato seed, apparently, in the world. That's crazy. But it is, and only less than 1% is really grown in the Netherlands, so this is all export. Then we're good in cattle and I think to some extent, but definitely in layers and in swine. And this is what happened. And today, or last year, we produced almost 105 billion, this is in euros, but close to the dollar, in terms of export. So that's considerable for a country like us. And roughly 70% of this is really also partly produced in the Netherlands. So it's not only moving around and trading in things, importing and exporting again. So having said that, like I said, breeding is one of the parts that we are quite developed in, and I will then for now explain a couple of things on animal breeding and some applications to tropical areas. But first, I think a small intermezzo on how a breeding program works. So like I said, Mr. Purcell already explained quite some technical details, and I think it fits very well together. We didn't prepare that part, I think, but how does our breeding program work in general, and especially in the case of our aquaculture breeding programs? So at the left side, you see that we have what we call a breeding nucleus. It's the heart of the breeding program. This is where everything happens. Typically, we have those animals in a biosecure environment. So to make sure that we protect well the stock that we have and that we use as a basis for our production. Every generation, we produce new families. A whole bunch of them, and we grow all the small animals, and we evaluate all those what we call candidates for selection. We evaluate them for the traits of interest. We don't select on one specific trait, but it may be on growth, plus disease resistance, general survival, meat quality, in terms of color, or firmness, or fat contents. Specific disease resistance, sometimes used with specific markers, SNP markers, like Mr. Purcell already explained. We used in all our programs genomic selection, multiple ways at least to identify candidates are the best for the breeding part. And finally, we select our elite broodstock, that's what we call. So we would have top shrimp, for example, and we would use those animals to produce the new families. And that means that the circle is closed, and we always keep the circle closed. There's not new material coming in. That's not the intention, at least. We use the families that we produce also for the production part, so what our customers want, need. In the case of our company here in Kauai, it's called Kona Bay. We produce broodstock animals. We sell the broodstock, the animals that actually produce the eggs that become shrimp later on for consumption. That's what we sell. In our Ecuadorian program, we sell larvae, the PL, post-larvae ourselves directly. However, selecting animals in such an environment, a nucleus that's biosecure, this typical environment is not very much what a commercial environment is like. It's clean, it's protected, like I said, no diseases around. So we need to optimize our selection procedure. We need to include information from commercial, real-life conditions. So what we basically do, very simple, we send out of the center, the nucleus center, we send brothers and sisters to field trials, sometimes just with customers, sometimes in special facilities that we have ourselves, and we evaluate the performance of these animals. And we know for each family, on family basis, but even at genomic level, how well they are actually performing. And that information is used, again, to select broodstock that is in the nucleus, and we can trace that back. And similarly, we also use disease challenges to really test animals on specific disease resistance. So we know for every family, this is a good family, this is not a good family. All that information is processed, and then we make a balanced selection where we say, okay, this is animal good in growth and in survival, whatever you want. And we maintain the genetic diversity, and that's the way we run our breeding program. And we do that generation after generation. That also means that you get a compounding effect every time the stock gets a little better. And in salmon, that takes, say, 4 years to produce a new line, so that is very slow progress. But in shrimp, we do 2 generations per year, so there we are much faster. So how can we use our breeding technology to optimize selections for different regions? And I have a nice example, and it's not quite tropical, but I think this is a very striking example. That's what we do in our program in Chile. We evaluated and we still evaluate our families, the families in our breeding nucleus, in field trials, but in different environments. And what you see here in the small, in 2 different environments, actually, in Chile, you see in the little map at the right side, there's region 12, it's in the very south, so that's very close to the South Pole. It's quite tough conditions for animals, even for salmon. And we evaluated that with locations in more north, where it's a more stable, controlled environment, say region 10 and 11 in this case. We evaluate the same families, but in the 2 different environments. And on the x-axis, you can see the performance of our animals, and this is simple in body weight, so not very special trait, really. And every dot represents 1 family. So you see there's animals that produce pretty well, they're at the right side of the graph, and not so good animals at the left side. And then on the y-axis, we show the performance of the animals in region 12. Axis region 11, and then the y-axis is region 12. And it's the same thing. The animals that are families that are performing well, they're on the top. The bottom are the less good performing animals. So you can see already immediately that 1 family is in 1 region is performing pretty well, but in the other it may not. For example, if I look at the animals performing in region in region 11. Yeah, those are the 5 dots at the right side of the red stripe. They're pretty good. On average, they are 800 grams almost better than the average of the whole population. However, in region 12, you will see 109, that it is 190 less than the average. So actually, the animals that are performing well in 11 are not performing so well in region 12. So you cannot use the same families in the same area. Now, you can try this or use this kind of technology, of course, in salmon, but we also do this in trout and also in shrimp. Trout, we are selling or producing our animals in like I said, in the Seattle area, but we select them based on information from Peru, from Europe, Russia, well, not these days, but normally. And we select and we produce animals that are performing better in specific regions. In shrimp, we do the same. Yep, thank you. And we do this, for example, and it's less on climate, because it's all tropical, you could say, but there are different farming systems around. So there's very extensive systems. There is a hole in the ground almost, you could say. And some farmers just throw a little bit feed in. There's little control on how to optimize the whole performance. But there's also very intensive systems, high controlled farms with oxygenation, aeration, special feeds, medication is used to really push, and high densities really get as many shrimp out of it. There's a question of sustainability, of course, but I'll stay out of that right now. But depending on the different environment, you may need a different kind of animal. Like on the left side, we're looking for animals that are more resistant to diseases, because the farmers do not really control. And the farmer may be happy if the animals do not grow so fast, at least they shouldn't die. At the right side, these farms do a lot to make sure that the animals do not die. So the only thing that they're really interested in almost is growth, to put it quite extreme, but that's what it is. There's also a group that's in the middle. So how can you deal with that? Well, like I showed, you can select different families, and for those different environments, you can manage that in a breeding program. So now I apologize for the leaflets that you see at the top. This is not really intended as a marketing, but it's really to show how this works in practice for us. So we really develop different lines, two main pure lines, as we call it, strength line and the speed. And the name says it, I guess. The speed is really selected for growth. And of course some survival, but really intended to go to intensive farms. On the other side, we have the strength population. They are very tough animals. They can resist really tough conditions, but they are also slower growing. And that's okay for the farmer, and it fits well. And then we have the mid part, which is basically a hybrid of the two pure lines, and we call that the balance line. Well, I don't need to explain too much about that, I think. I prefer to talk about aquaculture, but I thought in this case, for this audience, it's also good to highlight one of the projects that we are involved with Hendrix Genetics, and it involves the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Poultry Foundation. Sasso is one of our companies, and it is really about a project where we are developing a breed of chicken for layers, double purpose, I should say, so both for layers and for meat production, for the African environment. And why? Well, normally our products are in layers, in the layer division is really focused on the more intensive production, well-controlled farms, educated people. They know exactly what to do, so they can deal with, you could say, almost the Ferrari. Yeah? These animals are very well-performing. The African situation is where there's a huge market and a huge demand for eggs. However, the level of education is typically not everywhere, but in many cases, of course, lower. The training is not there. Often access to logistics to feed and to genetics is poor. Sometimes it's difficult to reach a market. There's no cold chain. So everything is, you could say, less developed over there. That means that these the animals that we're producing are not really fit for the purpose for this market. There is a need, but there's no real product. So what we started to do in collaboration with the partners is develop a breed that is actually like what we also are doing with the shrimp, that is able to grow in these environments. So they are tough. They are, they know what to do if a predator is flying over, a bird of prey or something. The other chickens would not be able to deal with that, to be honest. But this is really an animal that's much stronger and much more developed for this environment. However, that's not enough, because like I already mentioned, there's a whole lot of things that are not going well. So how do you make sure that this actual product is also being taken up by the market, adopted, and to also to be able to help the local market to develop? Now there will be a lot of clicking, so please pay attention. Yeah. So we start with a private company that's already based in Africa. But in this case, I show one, but there's multiple in this project. This is a company that's like the normal way that we would be working is taking parent stocks, parent animals from Hendrix Genetics in this case, from the breeder company, and would use them for egg production. And the egg production would result into chicks, so small birds that would be sold on for final egg production or meat production. So that's what I just said. So the company provides a dual purpose breeding. The private company takes the parent stock and is producing day-old chicks. They feed and they supply the feed and vaccines on these animals, and they sell them to small breeder units, as we call them. In this case, 4. Oh, there it is, yeah. And they also give technical support. So there's a training component in there, really, to make sure that these breeder units that are not so well developed yet, that they are able to grow those day-old chicks in a proper way. And there's also a finance part in there, because we need to have starting capital, of course, to be able to develop a breeder unit, to make sure that animals can be grown, that feed can be bought, etc., to get things started, basically. The breeder units, they grow the day-old chicks to roughly 4 weeks old, and then these animals are sold to the smallholder farmers. So this is the final chain of the part in the production chain. And the farmers themselves, they sell the males at roughly 3 months age. So that's for the meat part, and in 6 months the eggs are produced by the females, or for 6 months. So this is a way by support to make sure there is enough training around that the smallholders and the breeder units can actually grow the chickens, but also to have chickens that are fit for this particular environment. Well, the smallholder farmer has a own consumption part. So typically the farmers use the eggs and the meat for themselves and their own family, and the surplus is typically sold on the market. So really by providing a genetic resource, it's possible, with the right training and support, it's possible to develop this chain. And this is actually ongoing at the moment. So basically the project is, well, never finished, I guess, but it's completely set up and working, and we are now seeing indeed quite a good take-up of smallholder farmers that are using a much better animal fit for the purpose. So, yeah, what are the options for Hawaii? And I just mentioned a few things, and they were already mentioned here, and I already know now, seeing this, that I forgot quite a few. But clearly, there is more than tourism here, and one of the challenges that I do see is, if you compare back, thinking about the words that I had about the Netherlands, we are very central in Europe, well accessible, and we have quite a strategic position. For Hawaii, that may be more difficult, but okay, that's not up to me, I think, but that's what I would see. But what I do see is that there's already a very nice development going on, and the presentations this morning especially. Of course, Hawaii is a key place when it's about shrimp breeding globally. That's really the case. But we do see more examples of high-value aquaculture, kampachi, yellowtail, kind of almost tuna-like animal, fantastic, clams, oysters, I believe, coffee production. So there's many more. So I guess there's a lot of possibilities to grow the Hawaiian local industry, but also to serve as an example how we could do it elsewhere in the tropics. That's my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Robert. Very good. I have one question for you.
Yep.
I actually have a couple of questions for Robbert, but we only have a little time, and I'll reserve some of those when we do our panel discussion. But here's one. Could have been me asking this. I like it. Is inbreeding a concern within your closed nucleus broodstock? Why or why not?
Yeah, that's a nice question, because that refers to the genetic diversity that the previous presentation also touched on, of course. Is it a concern? In what way? It's not for me, because for us, because we handle it. We have the tools to make sure that we are keeping the diversity in our stock, because high inbreeding lowers the diversity, and on the long run, that means that you may not be able to respond to new pathogens or climate change. What we do is we have tools to make sure that we always keep a lot of different animals that are capable, and that's what we do in our nucleus, really. That's the core of a program. That's where we keep the diversity. So in that sense, I'm not concerned, but it's definitely something that we always monitor. I know that we can improve our programs way faster, but then it would definitely go at the cost of the diversity and the long-term viability of our programs.
Very good. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Robbert.